Riverside.
Welcome to Dance Talk with Joanne Carey, where the dance world connects, the conversations inspire, and where we are keeping them real. I'm your host, Joanne Carey, and today I am joined with Anna Sperber. She is a choreographer and performer. Her new piece will be shown in American Dance Festival next month at the end of June. We're going to talk about that, but we're also going to talk a lot about her background, how she came to dance, all those great things that I love to bring my listeners about my guests. So welcome, Anna, to Dance Talk.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
You're welcome. So, Anna, I'd love to dive right in and get right started with how you came to dance. How, were you little? How did that all, what's that story?
Yeah. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and I started, I think, quite young. I started with creative movement when I was about 5, I think, at a neighborhood. There was one woman who was, kind of held these classes in creative movement. So using our imaginations and our own movement style. And then I continued to take, I started with more modern classes, and I went to, different studios around Brooklyn. And then I always loved dance. It was something that I was always really drawn to doing. I did a lot of different things when I was young. I had a lot of different interests, but dance was kind of like a very consistent through line. I went to a lot of different summer camps. I went to Houston, which is in Long Island. And then as I got a little older, I went to Interlochen Arts Camp.
Wow.
And I think that's when I started to kind of have the desire to kind of experiment or to practice more technique or more forms in the work. And I then in middle school, it's funny to think about, but in middle school, I started going to the Martha Graham School.
Oh, that Martha Graham. We love her.
Yeah. And I think, I was simultaneously doing other styles too, but I started there. And I think that there was a real intensity to that work that really,
yes,
that was really exciting to me, especially when I was in high school, to be around all these women in their 20s and 30s doing all this really passionate, intense thing. And that was really exciting. And I think that's when I really started getting very serious and rigorous about it. But I was also in high school studying with a woman named Ellen Robbins, who taught, still teaches at Dance Theater Workshop, which is
DTW, yeah.
now New York Live Arts.
Yes.
She also taught improvisation and choreography.
Okay.
So she teaches kids that are very young, but I started doing that when I was in high school. And our concerts would be presented and produced at DTW.
Oh, wow. Wow.
We would conceive of the costume.
I performed at that space, or the old space. I performed there. Yes. It's a great, yeah.
Up the stairs.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we would have our, in high school, we would have our yearly concerts there, and we would each perform a solo and then make a group work all together. So I really started, funny, I haven't thought about all this in so long, but I really started making dances, young.
When you were,
kind of simultaneously at the same time as also being really interested in training as a dancer.
And then so that was high school, right?
Yeah. And then after high school, I went to SUNY Purchase, which was I had a lot of different interests, but in high school, I really I went to an academic high school, but then I think that it's when I really decided that I wanted to go to, had it in my mind that I really wanted to go to conservatory. So I did. And then I went to SUNY Purchase. And then, and my sophomore year, after my sophomore year at SUNY Purchase, I went to ADF as a student.
Wow. That's nice. And then you graduated from SUNY, correct? Did you graduate from
Yeah.
SUNY? Yeah. I mean, I love that you're sharing that because I love the listeners to hear too. There's, so many different ways dancers come into their careers, and you sound so focused from such a young age about the track you were on with it seems like to me,
Yeah.
from the modern and the creative movement aspect of it. Did you have any other, I'm sure at the conservatory, I'm sure at SUNY you had, a broad range of things. Can you talk about when you were at SUNY, what you had to study while you were there?
At Purchase, yeah. I mean, it's
Yeah.
interesting too because it does, like when I'm listening to the way I described it, it does sound very, and it was, but
Mhm.
like before I went to SUNY Purchase, I think I was interested in like ceramics and history and
Mhm, mhm.
different things. But once I really decided that I was like pursuing dance in this
Dance.
way, at Purchase, like you mean the curriculum at Purchase?
Yes. Hmm.
Well, we were in the studio from like 10 a.m.
Yeah.
to 10 p.m.
Which
basically.
is heaven, right?
Yeah. And we there was ballet, there was different modern techniques,
Mhm,
there was Graham, there was like styles that the kind of teachers developed on their own. I think.
mhm. Yes, yes. Modern lends itself to that.
Kevin Wynn was like an important teacher who
Mhm,
recently passed away, but his class was just like all about like movement and energy,
mhm,
high
mhm,
energy, a lot of movement. And I think that was exciting for all of us at the time. And also, I studied with Neil Greenberg,
mhm.
who I'm still close with and in contact with.
That's
But
nice.
he's a choreographer who was in the Cunningham Company
Mhm,
um, before he made his own work. And um, he taught something called Klein technique, which was
oh,
like a
I
really
don't know that. Yeah, I don't know
more
what that
about
is.
like somatics and anatomy
Okay.
and like um, working with like different physical principles.
Mhm,
And so that was an introduction to that kind of work for
mhm,
me. And he also taught improvisation. So we
mhm,
took improvisation, which I was like, I think I had kind of come in from working with Ellen and from my background, had a little bit more experience
mhm.
off the bat than most of the people, starting off at
Yes.
in
I
college.
love it. I love improv.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah.
still like a huge part of my practice
Mhm,
now, um, though different than
mhm,
than I had an understanding of it then. Um, what else did we had to take dance history, we had to take
mhm,
anatomy, we had to take music.
mhm.
I had to take point as a freshman, and that,
Really? Wow.
yeah,
Okay.
I don't
That's
know.
interesting.
Yeah, I don't necessarily, if I was going to design a curriculum, I
Mhm,
know that I would require
mhm,
if point, unless you were going to be a ballet
mhm,
dancer. But I did take points
mhm.
semester, I
Had
think.
you taken it ever before? Have you ever
I
had
was,
no?
I was
A little
never
bit.
never on track to be a ballet dancer.
Right, right.
It was
Mhm.
never my inclination.
Yeah.
But I there was a period like when I was younger where I was like wanted to learn ballet,
Yeah.
and I did do a little bit of point, but
Mhm,
um not so much. Um what else? We took composition,
mhm.
choreography. Um, I started that earlier. You usually don't take it until your sophomore year, but I started
Okay.
as a freshman.
Oh, okay. And was it because you were a little more advanced or because why did you take it early?
Because I had experience, because I had been working in
Mhm.
that way already and I had
Yeah.
interest, so I asked if I
If
could.
you could do it, yeah.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
funny. It's like, so I haven't really thought about all this in
Yeah.
a long time.
It's
So
interesting.
yeah,
I think, I think it's interesting for the listeners too, because so often, you don't know what goes on behind or what the training involves or, what goes into making a piece of choreography or how each choreographer comes about what their system is, so
yeah,
to speak, or, their technique or what have you. So that's why I like to kind of lay that out, for listeners and for myself too, to get a better understanding of you, who you are as an artist, so let's talk about that. Who are you as an artist? How would you describe yourself?
Hmm. Well, I am a choreographer and a performer.
Hmm.
I make work that's both very much like from the body, from like a
Hmm.
physical, sensorial. experiential place. I also think a lot about the visual design
Mm-hmm.
of work.
The
And
visual design of the actual what the audience is seeing on the dancers, or the whole visual design of it.
when I said that, I was thinking of the whole visual design of it. I
Okay.
really think of choreography. I mean, I feel
As
like
the
choreography is really, it's like choreographing the whole experience of
mm,
the audience. So from
hmm
the minute
I
from
like that.
that you enter the space, that the
You're
that
drawn in.
feel the dance, considering like what the room feels like, what the light feels like,
Hmm
what the space feels like, where you're sitting in relationship to the other people,
Yeah.
what's set up. Does it feel mysterious? Does it feel light? Does it feel ominous? All the
hmm
of, um, what's the shared experience of everyone in the room?
hmm
Um, so I use a lot of improvisation in my work,
hmm
um, but there's also a lot of like set rigorous.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So when you say you use a lot of improvisation, when you're working on a piece and you're rehearsing a piece, and perhaps you're improving in your rehearsal, does that then become the structure of the piece, or are you actually using improvisation on stage live while we're watching it? It's unfolding in that manner.
In different works, I've used both of those,
Hmm
or both of those things like kind of come into play. I always use a lot of improvisation. We're always practicing a lot of improvisation in the process
Yeah.
of creating work, especially I feel like, I mean, throughout the process, but especially in the beginning, I feel like it's a way that um, I I think it has a function in like different ways at different times in the process. But in the
hmm
beginning, I feel like it really it helps create a common language for the people that are going to be involved in the work.
Yeah.
Me and the dancers and us as a group all together. It helps me
Yeah.
it helps me see who they are in this other way
Yeah.
also. And I think it helps us just get to know each other on a level that's on a very like physical, imaginative
Yeah.
level. Um, and then, so that helps me kind of imagine ways, like the imagine qualities that I want to bring out in us all together and individuals. Um, and sometimes then also it leads to sometimes we in this process we learned a lot of material from video. So the
Ah.
dancers learned a lot of their own material.
hmm
Um, so that's integrated into material that I set and choreographed, like that specifically. Also, there's like so the work is a trio for three other
Uh-huh.
dancers.
The work that's being presented at
Work
ADF now.
presented at ADF, yeah.
hmm
Um, I mean, I could speak about other works also, but
No, it's fine. If you want to talk about Beacon now, we can. We can. Doesn't
just
matter.
like I mean, we premiered the piece last week, so it's like very fresh.
Yeah, yeah, it's fresh.
Um, but there's one part of this work that is a solo for me,
hmm
and I um I can spend hours in the studio working by
hmm
myself, and a lot of what I do during that time is improvisation, and then
hmm
watching video of myself
hmm
improvising. um and this particular solo stayed, there's like an improvisational element that kind of stayed.
hmm
The whole thing, there's elements of it that are set and that repeat. It's the same solo when you see it every time, but it's
Oh,
also an improvisation.
okay.
So yeah, yeah,
And it's just for listeners to know, it's called Beacons, correct?
correct.
And I wrote down something from the description that was on ADF, which was on American Dance Festival, their website, and it said in the description, we are beacons. Our dance is tenderness. Did you say that? Is that you described that?
That is, yeah, I think I wrote that early
hmm
on, but yes, I did write that.
So I thought that was really moving. Can you expand on that a little bit? We are beacon because when I first read beacons, I was like, what does that mean? I was like, what did it's always interesting the titles. But then when you said we are beacons, our dance is tenderness, and I thought, very interesting. So I just want you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
What that means. What is the audience going to see when they if they read that, you go in and you read about it usually before you watch, right? What are they going to see?
I think that, since then I've also generated other language, but I think that that language was, um, well, the title Beacons came from feeling like, um, I wanted to create a space in almost response or contrast um, to kind of globally and like what's happening in the world that feels pretty dark
Mm-hmm.
and complicated and um, even, yeah, ominous or challenging sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to kind of offer, like, sometimes when I'm making work, and my work isn't narrative, it's not like a literal response to be read, but
Mm-hmm.
but I definitely do like respond to things that are happening in the world
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
in my personal experience.
sure.
And so, there have been times when I've responded to, things in the broader world where I felt kind of defiant or felt like I wanted to like be really assertive or
Mm-hmm.
aggressive in kind of countering almost like um, in defiance of things that felt problematic.
Mm-hmm.
And this time I just felt like I wanted to offer us like a respite or like a
Mm-hmm.
like almost like kind of like a reclaiming
Who we are.
of an yeah, who we are, and of an expansive place, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of a feeling of lightness
And peace.
and peace.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not, not in a way that's like
Yeah, like, oh, peace. Let's have to, yeah. Mm-hmm.
denying what's happening, but that like claiming that as like a as our own power, not to let that be taken away, and
Yeah,
that, that to empower ourselves to hold on to these
yeah,
feelings and, these
yeah.
values. um so I think Beacons, and also the three dancers that I'm working with are really lovely and
Mm-hmm.
strong and um energetic, and I felt like and we just had like a really nice, really all the words I'm thinking of fall short, but that it was a really like great process of working together,
Mm-hmm.
and it felt like it was just like an opportunity to offer like the word beacons as like a light, like a
Yeah,
guiding light
yeah. Like
almost.
that, when you have that like a light, a lighthouse, a ship
Yeah,
out there, you see that beacon,
yeah,
yeah, like you're going towards that. That's where you're moving towards.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
kind of setting, like offering that kind of
Yeah.
image. And then someone who was at the show last week, I'm trying to remember what she said. She said something really lovely about the title, that there was a lot of like use of the periphery of the space.
Mm.
And so she was kind of seeing the word beacons as like, lighthouse in the dark, kind of offering like the place between the land and the water,
Yeah. Yeah.
can't really,
Hmm.
so like kind of defining that and kind of giving you a guide of that border. So,
Ah.
that's also to say that I have ideas and desires that like I create when I'm making, but I also am not, I really value like creating work that is inviting the audience to bring their own
Yeah.
experience to their own meaning and their own
Yeah.
experience to the work. So I'm not interested in having to define it or
Hmm. Yeah,
like,
like have it be, this is what I mean, this is what it is, and if you didn't get it, it's wrong.
yeah,
Yeah, which is
bring your
beautiful. And
imagination and your own experience to the
mhm,
work, um and
which what is art and what is the experience of dance. And unless it's a story ballet or if it's a very specific story you're telling through dance, that is what's wonderful about contemporary dance, modern dance, interpretive dance, so that the audience has an entry point, the audience, whatever that could be. And you start, in the space, that space,
yeah,
when you describe that, that's all part of it, that's all part of the experience. And that's why, as an audience member, we become affected, however that is, positive, negative, midline, whatever, in and out of a piece. Perhaps we are moved by one part more than another, but we definitely have a response to it when we're left to enter the piece. I find, you
Yeah,
know,
for sure.
and then as a dancer, you know, when you're dancing something like that, you know, that's moving through you as well. You know, that's why, you know, when it's like only performed one night, it's like, oh, it's like there and over, right? You know, and it moves through you, and another night can be a different way you as a dancer experienced it.
Yeah.
You know, go ahead, you get.
Well, yeah, just to that point, I was also thinking about the piece because we, you know, in large part because we just performed it. I feel like to what you're saying about when it's just performed one night, it's like I feel like a piece becomes kind of what it is once it is once an audience is experiencing it and there's that exchange. And I feel like
Mhm.
I learned so much about
Yeah,
what a piece actually is. You know, it
yeah.
kind of like becomes itself, kind of like crystallizes and grows
Hmm.
into like
Yeah,
what it
yeah.
is.
When the audience is there, it's like it lives. You know, and that's why, you know, dance is so, you know, in person, seeing it, all the things that we use and are able to implement now, with it, you know, but live performance,
Nothing like
yeah, nothing beats live performance, right?
true. It's really
Uh,
true. Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and the solo that it was interesting what you were saying also makes me think about the solo that I'm performing in part because there is a lot of room for improvisation within it. I learned a lot about it. We had 5 performances, um, and I feel like I was able to kind of try different things.
Mm.
I learned about it each night and kind of like push in different directions each time, you know, which was exciting
Yeah.
and really fun. So I'm excited to do that at ADF again.
Yeah. And remind me again, wait, did you say you were in this piece or not in this piece? Are you in Beacons?
Beacons, yeah. Well, it's mainly a trio,
Mm-hmm.
3 other dancers, Tim Bendernagel, Owen Prum, and Zoe Williams. And
Mm-hmm.
then I have a solo
Solo. Okay.
at the end, which sort of serves as an epilogue.
Mm-hmm. Oh, nice.
And it is.
Yeah. And then as a choreographer, when you, you know, watch this unfolding,
Hmm.
what is that like for you as the choreographer? You know, are you sitting there and being affected, of course.
Hmm.
But when you then have that the choreographer the person who created that piece,
Yeah.
you know, are you, what's that like for you? What is it like for you?
And do you mean during the performance or during the process of
I
making?
think, well, both. How about both during the performance and during the process?
Um, well, sorry, can you like what's what like for me? I'm just curious. Like, I
What
just like
when as the choreographer, when you are working on a piece
yeah,
and you are let's talk about rehearsal
yeah,
first
yeah.
when you're creating it. What's that like for you? What are you seeing unfold in front of you? What reaction are you getting that, then are you taking from that and creating more, you know, what's that process like for you?
Yeah.
And then when you take it, now you're in performance space. So the second part is you're in performance space and you're seeing it as a choreographer, you know, how are you receiving that?
I there's a lot of intuition and instinct
Mm-hmm.
um when I'm making in the studio. I often come in with like a feeling or an idea, but I often don't come in knowing where it's going to go.
Mm-hmm. It's
Um
very modern of you.
yeah, I find that I really will like start with you know, sometimes it starts with improvisation or starting with generating some movement
Mhm,
or working with objects. I've done a lot of like
mm,
kind of working with objects and
mhm,
generating sounds or movement in response, you know, in integration with that. Um, and then I just really respond to what's happening in the room a lot of
mm.
the time. Um, and it's a very like intuitive
Yeah.
path that I follow.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but you know, and I think that like often when I'm in process, like I'll be generating a lot of different kinds of material at the
Mhm,
same, you know, like kind of in parallel. Like today we'll work on this, and it's
mhm.
really like intense, physical,
Yeah.
rigorous, like um energetic. movement sequence perhaps, but then maybe I'm also at the same time generating a sequence that's like a very subtle, gentle gestural,
Mhm.
pattern. So I'll kind of move between different palettes of material
Yeah.
while I'm working this. And in this work, it ended up being like very episodic, where like I have one section and then they all kind of live on their own
Oh, okay.
after the other. But
Nice. Almost like a book, like a book.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
nice.
There
Yeah.
is something about that. I was thinking about it like short stories or chapters
Mhm.
almost.
Mhm. Well, when you said your soul is like an epilogue, I was like
Yeah.
kind of like a chapters in a book.
I think that might have stemmed partly from this past fall. I was on a residency and there was a lot of writers there
Oh, okay.
and composers, and I was like really thinking about like trying to grapple with like, I think because I did have so many different sections of the
Mhm.
work that had different kind of feelings and qualities,
Mhm.
I was grappling with the structure of how it
Mhm.
was going to form.
Mhm.
I was just thinking about all these different ways that these,
Writers too.
people working in different mediums,
Yes.
structures, and so I think that
Influenced it. That's it. Yeah, yeah. I think that's great. That
I was like
all the
claimed it. I was like, I can do that. I can
yeah.
own it.
Which makes it come to life like that. So, did you always, it sounded like that you were always creating growing up, through your whole schooling, even through high school, even when you were doing other things. Were you always drawn to the person who was the choreographer? Were you always drawn to creating, being the one who was creating the pieces, as opposed to I know you're still performing in your pieces, but were you, because some people just aren't like,
Yeah.
I'm not, I never was like, oh, I want to choreograph stuff,
Yeah.
you know?
I always was also interested in performing
Hmm.
in working with other people, other choreographers also.
Hmm.
Um, I was always interested in both elements.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say like a, as a choreographer that kind of like just became kind of grew in its
Hmm.
prominence in like my direction. I just
Yeah. I don't, and I asked that only because there's some people who just, that's what they're drawn to. And I know I can just say from my own experience, I was never like that. I always wanted to be in it. Like I was very happy and content with being the dancer in the piece. I wasn't like,
was
I
happy to
had ideas.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
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 No, I was very interested in working with other choreographers as a
Hmm.
choreographer, for sure. And
Yeah.
I did do that throughout school, and then after school I worked with different friends and colleagues
Hmm.
and other choreographers. I think I it's interesting to think about. I worked with Juliette Mapp a lot, who was a choreographer um in her work. And then I think that I think honestly what happened was I had a child when I had a child 14 years ago, whenever that 2010.
Okay.
And I think that after that point, I think I just focused more on my own work, and it just
Good.
like, you know,
Changes things.
it
Yeah.
changed things,
Changes perspective.
which
Yeah.
was part of it. But I
Yeah.
think it wasn't even so much of a conscious choice. I just
Hmm.
kind of really,
Yeah.
I think, you can't do everything at a certain point.
Yeah. And does having a child, so have you choreographed anything around that theme, anything around motherhood, anything about have you
Yeah,
touched on that?
not so much. Not so
Hmm.
much. One, I think in more tangential ways, like
Hmm.
things have affected it. But
Hmm.
no, when I was pregnant, I made a piece called I made a piece that was cast. It had 5 women, and I was not performing in it. Um, and I think that during that process, like this is sort of funny tangent, but we were like thinking of names, baby names, and
Did you dance them out?
but I found out when we found out we were having a boy, I had really anyway. I ended up naming the piece Naomi, which was a name that we had if we were going to have a girl, and so
Oh.
I think somehow like the fantasies of
Hmm.
whatever I was like what I
Yeah.
thought might have been, kind of made its way into this
Yeah.
mysterious um,
Yeah.
qualities of this work. Yeah.
And now, you said you have a boy, right? You have a son. So does he dance at all? Perform? Is he in the arts? Does he?
He's in high school.
Hmm.
He's really smart in like seeing work and
Hmm.
in talking about work.
Hmm.
He's a really good like visual artist and like drawing and
Yeah.
photography. He's really interested in film,
Hmm.
but um he's more of like he's interested in music and like track and
Right. Right. Yeah,
so
no, it's just interesting to,
it is
because they
yeah.
say the apple doesn't far fall, right? So it's involved in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit to the Graham influence when you were studying Graham, because it is, Graham is so profound and passionate and physical and energetic and emotional and all those things. Can you talk about how the Graham technique has and studying there has influenced your work and influenced you as a creator?
Yeah. I think it's interesting also. I think that relates to what you were asking about, like who I wanted to perform with, like because I didn't when I was at the Graham School, I was there for like many years from like when I was like 11
Wow.
through high school, through
Hmm.
college, like,
Yeah.
I mean, many other things also, but I was a scholarship student like through high
Hmm.
school and I think I never like had the desire to be in the Graham company. Like
Hmm.
that wasn't an ambition or that wasn't the draw to me, but it was like I think it was really the rigor and the intensity
Hmm.
and the kind of passion,
Hmm.
like I remember being
Do you mean of the work or of the dancers? Do you mean of the physicality?
of the studio work, like
Hmm. Hmm.
class. I
Yeah.
mean, we did learn repertory like in
Yeah.
in the studio,
Hmm.
but there was something about like I just have these vivid memories of being, like a teenager and I was taking adult classes
Hmm.
because they had a teen program, but it was more, like I was taking
Beginner. You were
I was like
advanced of that.
yeah, I was
Hmm.
advanced at that point. I was taking classes, in the after school I would go and take,
Hmm.
the more advanced classes and I just remember like there was just a room full of these women with this like intense like passion and drive and like just working so hard and I think there was like a sexuality to
Hmm.
it, and like that was really like kind of a different it's just like tapping into something different that I,
Hmm.
like as a younger person was like uh really inspiring and like and all these teachers would use these like beautiful images of like spiraling around
Yeah.
yourself like a seashell or
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
like just these very like intense passionate imagery
Hmm.
um and they were also just like fierce,
Yeah.
and I think that was really like so exciting and
Hmm.
motivating,
Hmm.
like I just wanted to be there and to be like
Yeah.
sweating in the room with these
Yeah.
women, like, and men,
Yeah.
with these other people dancing
Yeah.
together. So I think what's interesting is that like aesthetically, my work is very different. It's more like experimental and
Uh-huh.
postmodern.
Hmm.
Um, but I think that there is like a drive, a kind of like emotional like intensity,
Hmm.
kind of like a visceral
Yeah.
like um
And that's the somatics too,
yeah.
right? When you study that and talk about that as well too, because not everybody knows what that means and what that entails. Can
Uh-huh.
you talk about that and explain that for listeners?
Yeah, I think that that's almost like a different I mean it's all connected. I
Hmm.
think that like but I think that the study of somatic practices and how that's affected my work is like almost from the vantage point of looking to move from a place of more ease in the
Mm-hmm.
body, as opposed to Graham, which is like a place of
Wow.
muscularity,
Yes, and
rough,
rounding.
like and like ferocity. I mean, and and
Of
poetry and all.
course, yeah.
I think that like approaching the somatic work of like Klein technique that Neil was teaching when I was at Purchase, and then also um, Alexander technique later.
Hmm. I
Um,
did a little Alexander, very little, which I found fascinating. I
yeah,
didn't mean to interrupt you.
no,
Yeah.
sure, yeah. I
Hmm.
mean, I think actually I've always also been from very early on, like I would love to go to the studio and like literally like even when I was in high school, like warm up for like an hour before class. Like I
Yeah.
just love people, like dancers that I'm
Yes.
working with are also always like, it's sort of like a running joke. Like I can warm up for like 3 hours. I love that
Moving. Yes.
thing
Yes.
and kind of like opening up pathways in the
Mhm.
body and
And that's what's so great about Graham technique is that the way it opens up all those pathways. Like that's a great way to say it. All because it really does. I found anyway when I started studying modern, because at first I was like, what is this? I went on when I was auditioning in colleges. I came from a jazz background, and you had to do your piece of back then. There was you didn't, it wasn't video or anything. You went live to the audition, and there was the table of the people,
oh yeah,
the teachers sitting behind the table, you know,
100%.
and
Same.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And which is intimidating,
Yeah.
but you do it. And I remember them asking me to take, because I had, my little jazz outfit on. And, it was very funny. I remember it was a leotard that was divided in half. Half was like turquoise and half was black. And I had my little jazz shoes and my little leg warmers on,
That
you
was
know, yes, yes. And I remember because it was so vivid, because that's what it was, and it was my piece was Lionel Richie, Running with the Night. And
do a
so
video of that. I want to see it.
I do not, because you didn't do that then,
Right. Yeah.
and I remember them doing the piece, and I was just so happy that I got through it in front of that quiet room with the table.
Yeah.
And then they asked, "Can you take your shoes off?" And I was like, "Take my shoes off?" And they're like, "Yes, can you take your shoes off? And then we'd like to see you do the piece without your shoes."
Oh wow.
And I was like, "Oh, okay." What was I going to say? No.
Yeah.
But I remember how, like, how intimidating that was, but it was also really freeing to
Hmm.
take my shoe, because I had never done a modern class before. And I did the whole piece then without my shoes on. And then they asked me to do some running and some, walking and all kinds of different things. And I was like, okay, I'm just like, okay, like run. And I remember going out of there, and I just felt so exhilarated first that it was over, but then I was like, I think I'm going to take a modern class. And then I was really hooked on it. And then when I got into school and blah, 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 and did all that. And then when I was just hooked on modern, but I forget, I got off on a tangent. You were talking, you should have been explaining
No, that's
somatics
right.
and all that.
So
But
wild, like all but like just hearing the details about your leotard and like
yes,
how, yeah, like the sense memory of all of that is so vivid and
yes,
yeah. Um,
yeah. But we were talking about Martha Graham too. And
I
then when
think
I
we were
got,
talking
yeah,
about, and you were asking about somatics, and
yeah,
I think part of it is also like the Graham technique is so difficult and like asking you to do these really like things that were probably very like naturally coming out of her body, but they're these
yeah,
like very challenging
yes.
um, actions and um, and I think part of that warming up is also like being ready and available
Hmm.
for those kinds of things if you're not naturally
Yeah.
you know open in those areas. But I think the somatic work also I'm interested, or I also became interested in like I think it's a way to like find pathways and movement that comes out of your own that isn't following these paths
Mhm.
of other like
Mhm.
allowing the his like I guess what it makes me think of is like in terms of what I look to create now, or like using somatics or improvisation, like both using the history that you have in all of those training and different histories in your body, but also letting yourself find new pathways and un that just yeah. I'm I'm not using my words well right
No,
now.
I'm understanding it. It's,
Creating those
it's,
patterns that you
yeah,
haven't arrived at until that
yeah,
moment.
yeah. And it's tapping into, there's so many layers in the body. There's so many layers, and it uncovers them all. When we start moving, like an improvisation, when you just start moving in the space, or you start to move towards someone in the space, right? And you're reacting, and then your body is shifting, all that energy. It's a lot of energy.
Yeah,
I don't want to say energy work, but it kind of is energy work, and it just does, like, you access areas because when you have to pour out inside a piece, you have to have access to that. Otherwise it gets stuck. And when the energy, how you hear in dance, and you hear in modern too, the energy coming out of you, right? The energy has to extend beyond your fingertips, all that. And so it adds to that, I think.
yeah, and I think that like having different access points and entry points into your own experience as a performer is kind of what to me um makes both like a compelling performance experience and like watching someone. If there's a lot of different ways that someone can you know like I'm interested in watching someone else have like an authentic
Yeah.
experience, or
Hmm.
like you know um rather than I mean, there's different work that calls for different things, but rather than performing or showing me what they're experiencing, is actually experiencing the thing, being inside of something, and just
Yeah.
allowing themselves to be witnessed inside of it. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah. And I think, it's funny. I remember also like the somatic stuff. I remember my first summer at or my only summer at ADF as a student, there was this teacher like Eric Franklin,
Hmm.
who I don't know if he's there anymore, but he does like a lot of different somatic um, work, and like I think it's called like dynamic alignment. It's using imagery from
Hmm.
um, I can't even remember all the influences, but Irene Dowd, and
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
different influences, and that was really exciting to me too. I think that was like one of the places where I
Yeah.
learned, started exploring things like that.
Yeah. And I read something on your, I think it was in your bio or your website, something class.
Yeah,
What is that? Talk about that.
class. Well, there was someone named Jimmy James Kidd, and it was a friend who lived in New York. Um, I don't remember the year that we started it, but she is a great dance artist, and a kind of a force of like instigating different community performances and classes. She started this thing called Aunts, which is like a performance series.
Hmm.
But then class we initiated together. It was a series of classes that was looking to um, we kind of had the desire to make a space where people who didn't have a lot of experience teaching could practice,
Mm.
could develop
Huh.
as teachers and try new ideas,
Hmm.
and also where we could create a series of classes that were more affordable for people to take class, because it's really expensive in New York to take class.
Yes,
You
it
know,
is. Oh,
$20 a class. I don't even know. I don't,
yeah.
but or more maybe even. So we got some grant money, and yeah, and I had a studio at the time that I was running, so we did some classes there in different spaces, and we kind of curated a series of workshops and classes
Hmm.
that were offered at an affordable rate, and the teacher would also get paid a certain rate regardless of how many students showed up, because in
Oh,
that situation, teaching situation, like until you have like a following, or
yes.
it can be very challenging because you
Yes.
prepare, you spend a lot
Yes.
preparing the class, and then if you only have a couple people come, it could be lovely to teach them, which is great.
Yes.
Like, you
And
know,
they want to be there because
they
they
want to,
showed up, right? Mm-hmm.
which is great, like creatively and
Yeah.
pedagogically, but like then, you're also trying to, it's challenging financially sometimes.
Yes.
We're trying to create a model that was feasible
Hmm.
financially for both the students and the teachers, and also to kind of be able a place where you could explore new ideas and
Hmm.
practice teaching. And
Yeah, I like that, practice teaching, because not you, you know you don't, if you're performing, or you've gone to school and learn, you're not learning necessarily how to teach,
yeah,
which I think is so important, because you're then thrown out there and you're learning as you go, or you're doing what which a lot of it's good, but then some of it isn't so good, and that takes time to develop, and to even to become comfortable in your own way of teaching, your own style of teaching, your own voice of teaching.
yeah,
So I think that's interesting to
yeah,
give people the space. When I had my studio too, I've interviewed so many teachers and hired so many teachers through over the years, and I really tried my best to give them the space. I gave them my syllabus. I gave them what was expected. I gave them what needed to be accomplished. I was very organized. It was like a well-oiled machine.
mhm,
And but I also wanted to give them space to grow and to challenge them, with they were bringing something to me, they were bringing something to the studio, and I also had expectations as the vision of my studio,
yeah,
and to give them that space to grow and blossom and create something inside those perimeters,
yeah,
which I think is really important, and challenging.
yeah.
Yeah, I hear you are a Bessie Award winner 2022. Is that correct?
That's correct.
What
Yeah.
was that like to receive that?
Oh, it was really special. It was really
Hmm.
like it was a really wonderful honor to receive that. And meaningful for a lot of different reasons. And that piece was very meaningful too. So I think it was especially meaningful to
What
receive
was
the
the
award.
what did you receive it for?
I received it for a piece titled Bow Echo. Um,
Mm.
and Bow Echo was a piece that I made during the pandemic.
Mhm.
Um, I had been working on a project um, prior in 2019, and then it got canceled. The premiere was canceled,
Mhm.
as many things were.
Mhm.
Um, and someone who had seen some of my work um, reached out to me, and he was like a manager of this kind of arts building in Brooklyn, and said, I saw that your premiere got canceled. I'm so sorry. And he said, if you ever want to create a work at the American Can Factory on the rooftop, I have access to a rooftop that's 15,000 square feet.
Wow.
1,500. No, sorry.
Probably 1,500. 1,500. No, 15.
It was
Mhm.
15,000 square feet.
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, please, I would. So anyway, I created this piece, Bow Echo, on the rooftop and had performances there.
Oh,
And it was just really special to be able to make a work during that time
yeah.
and to have live performance. And I was working with some really special dancers. And um, so, yeah. And, it was really, yeah, it was satisfying.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. Congratulations. And so what would you say your voice as a choreographer, as a performer is? What would you say that is?
Wow.
If you have one, if you can label it, because I don't know if you want to put a
Yeah.
label on it.
I don't know if I would put a label on it. I mean, I definitely have a voice, but if I were to describe my, I think, I think I make work that's both, it's very personal,
Mhm.
and visceral, but it's also, Mhm. I work with, one way language that I've used to describe it in the past, I guess, is kind of like a meeting of kind of formal elements and very visceral wild elements. So
Mhm.
there's like a lot of freedom and intuition
Mhm.
involved in the process, but then there's also like elements of, I collaborate a lot with visual designers and composers,
Mm.
and um and there is a lot of like rigorous physicality
Mhm.
work. So I think it's like a meeting of all those dualities.
Mhm.
um but I think it is really, it can be very emotional, but it's also like, um, very like, I think it's very like experiential. Like
Mhm.
the experience of it is like of primacy to me.
Yeah.
It's like asking people to really bring themselves and really bring their attention and to really all be present in the room together.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah.
Yeah. No. And how do you get your dancers? How do you get your performers? How do you?
In different ways, I often like, you know, the new through people that I know
Mhm.
and that I'm in community with for
Mhm.
sure. Um, I'm often like drawn to someone's presence as a performer.
Mhm.
And then I'm kind of have approached people from that direction. If I know the people that they work with, then
Mhm.
um, sometimes when I see someone as a performer, and that, I feel like I can really like see a lot about
Yeah.
someone.
Yeah.
On occasion I've had auditions.
Mhm.
Um, that can be challenging,
Mhm.
different reasons, but it can also be useful or helpful to find people that you wouldn't know, that you
Yeah.
wouldn't. So that's nice. Um, yeah, I think it's important to me to also get to know someone,
Mhm.
because the dynamic in the rehearsal room is also really important. It's a
Yeah.
collaborative process.
Mhm.
There's a lot of trust and vulnerability in
Yeah.
the room when you're making something with people.
Yeah.
Um, so that's also
And
really,
physical. And when you're physical, right? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. What's it like for you to be back at ADF now presenting? What's that like?
It's thrilling. I'm really excited about it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I came back to ADF after I was a student in 1996, as I
Mhm.
said, and then in 2015, I was a footprints choreographer, and so I made work on the students.
Mhm.
And then this is the first time being commissioned
Yeah.
to bring work, and it's thrilling. I'm really
It
excited.
is thrilling, yes,
Yeah.
yes. And for listeners, it's Beacons will be at ADF American Dance Festival on June 25th and June 26th. You can go on their website to get tickets, and I believe on your website as well, right? Do you have a link on?
I
I'm not
will.
sure. I could be
I will put a
misspeaking.
link right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, there is a link.
Yeah, I was like assuming that it was on there.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
to see this piece, um, and before we wrap it up, I had also read that I think it was in the same description of Beacons
yeah. Mhm.
where you said, "How do we simultaneously experience change and stay continuously present?"
Yeah.
Talk about that.
That is a challenge always.
Always. And
Always.
I have to, when I was writing it down, I actually made a mistake and crossed it out. And I thought, isn't that interesting? I wrote down, how do we simultaneously experience change and stay connected? And I was like, wait, that's not what she said. And I thought, well, maybe that's it, staying connected. But I'll let you talk about that.
I think that, like, they staying connected and staying present can be kind of two ways of kind of phrasing something that's getting at the same
Hmm.
sense.
Yeah.
I think continually experiencing change and staying present is something that um, that is something to strive for every day.
Yeah.
As you walk through the world,
Yeah.
and as you're dancing, or as I'm dancing,
Hmm.
as we are, in inside of the work, letting new things come up,
Hmm.
but staying, not jumping ahead, but staying
Hmm.
with every moment.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love that. I thought that, wow, it's so appropriate for now. I think for what so many people are saying and searching for
Yeah.
and wanting to experience, not just when they go see some kind of performance, but in life. So I thought, wow, that was really, I thought that was a, interesting way to to phrase it.
Yeah.
On my it,
No, well, just like in offering performance, I feel like that is something that I feel like is a value and an aim of just dance performance always like is
yeah,
to kind of offer that like we're always changing, we're always offering something new, but to stay in each moment and experience each moment
yes.
as they come.
Yes. Well, thank you, Anna. Is there anything before we wrap it up that you would like to say to the listeners? Any words of wisdom, advice? You've offered a lot already. I know we want to get people to go down to ADF, see this, and see you. Where can they find other works of yours? Where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me. My website is annasperber.com. And I also have posted some things on Instagram.
Hmm.
Anna V. Sperber
Okay.
is where I'm reachable. Um, but yeah, I hope that everyone can come to ADF. And feel free to reach out to me if anyone
Yeah.
is curious about, getting in touch or asking questions. I'm always happy to connect
Yeah.
people for
Well,
sure.
thank you so much. Thank you for joining me on Dance Talk, Anna. And it's exciting to hear your work and to hear your thought process. You go a little deeper. You peel off a little more more layers and layers. It seems like with your work. I think that's my impression. I haven't seen it. Only looked the
Yeah.
clips and the videos you have posted, but it seems like you really like to get really to a deep level, which I find fascinating and intriguing, also all at the same time. So thank you for joining me, and thank you for sharing with my listeners about your work. Again, everybody, this is Anna Sperber. She will be June 25th, June 26th. Beacons will be at American Dance Festival, and this is Dance Talk with Joanne Carey. Follow us, like us, and share, share, share. Thank you for joining us, everybody.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure.
Powered by Riverside.